afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's TFANA Talk back.
And please join me in welcoming Tanya Pollard, who is TFANA's Council of Scholars Chair, and scholar Emma Smith, who's also the author of This is Shakespeare.
I want to start just by asking, when we change Shakespeare, when we play with Shakespeare, when we make Shakespeare new and our own, what do we get that's different in this particular rendition?
Some people will be here with a big knowledge of Macbeth behind them. For them, maybe part of what the adaptation does is the sort of pleasure of anticipation versus things that are different, things that are the same. I think there's something very different about an adaptation if you're not familiar with what it's an adaptation of, and that's quite a different sort of aesthetic question, isn't it? Does it succeed on its own? Is it always in relation to the prior text? Does it exist sort of in a reciprocal relationship, or can it work on its own? I suppose Zinnie Harris makes very clear that this is closely related to the play, particularly at the beginning. Yeah, so I mean, we get a weird familiarity overlaid with something very strange, which is, in some ways, if you were going to go Freudian about it, that's the definition of the uncanny. So no wonder we're all a bit sort of jittery. We've seen a thing that we know, and we also don't know it, and that's deeply unsettling. There's a claustrophobia about Shakespeare's play, and I think there's a claustrophobia really amplified in Zinnie Harris's version, because not only are we trapped with the Macbeths in their spooky knock, knock, knock castle, but we're also trapped in the play Macbeth. And all those images of entrapment. I mean, I just think it's so wonderful, her attached to the bed with the handcuff. It's a metaphor for the being attached, not being able to get free of this image.
But what I found so haunting on this particular viewing, and I've read the play before and I've seen this production before, was this sense of, as you say, Lady Macbeth chained to the bed, Lady Macbeth straitjacketed into this role, this sense of the gaslighting that we have here, a character, an actress who believes there's another story it's possible to tell, and who isn't being allowed to tell that story, that no matter how much freedom the possibility of an adaptation offers, there is this sense of entrapment. And as you say, it's a very claustrophobic play. It's short, it's fast, it's furious, we're stuck in that house, but she is so stuck in that role, and there's something so tempting, I think, in the first half of this production, thinking she's finally going to get some freedom. She's really going to be able to continue in this flare-up of energy and imagination and violence that we've seen, and then we see that taken away from her. And I just found that, not that we sympathize with a murderer, exactly, but there's something so compelling about this person that we then see stamped out in a way that she doesn't seem to understand. That, to me, is really haunting.
Shakespeare is not an original playwright in the sense that we mean original, or we might think of original. He takes all the stories from previous stories, as you probably know, and he can make all kinds of changes, but he can very, very rarely, it seems to me, change the ending. It's as if the stories, have their own shape, and then they're kind of elastic, but they snap back to the shape. So you can stretch them out to an extent, but they come back to how they were. So of all the things that Shakespeare himself changes of his source material, the ending is not usually one of them. And I felt that a bit as Our Lady Macbeth this afternoon comes closer and closer, and she feels, I think she feels that the other people in the production are going to help her, that they've given her the knife, they are giving her the tools to change the ending. I think she thinks we are going to help her, that we actually are rooting, we the audience, we're rooting for a different ending, and maybe like fairies, we didn't believe hard enough that it was going to be possible. So yeah, you're right that this is a play which is in some ways quite pessimistic. I mean, it rewrites the story while being quite pessimistic about how far you can rewrite the story.
The gaslighting, the way that she keeps trying to correct the people around her. No, queen, no, lady. And they keep saying, I see a man. What's that coming from?
One of the things I like about the play is sometimes it tells us quite clearly what to think, Sometimes it's much more mysterious. This is a moment where it tells us quite firmly what to think, where she is saying they're so used to seeing authority in the male form that they can't see me as the king. They can't see me as the queen. Sorry, they just see me as a king. As many people will know, there is something very vulnerable making about putting on something white, isn't there? We all know that we're just going to drop something on it or straight away, and there's something about that in that repeated moment about the white dress. So being given a white dress, it seems as if she's being set up for this, the impossibility, the sort of gradual besmirching of her character,
Yes.
which is so available to us all. We all know even if we don't know the play, we probably all know what Lady Macbeth is supposed to be like.
Right.
And it's a lovely and fraught encounter at the end when the two of them, when he says, "You made me do it," she says, "Well, you thought of it straight away. It was you wanted to be king." He says, "No, I wouldn't have done it without you," which is something I think generations of school kids and others have been taught about the play. So it comes back on itself, doesn't it, in some amazing ways.
The white dress also just seems to me so freighted with associations of virginity and weddings, and that I thought really underscored the shape of the Macbeths as a couple, which in the beginning of the play I think we saw such a persuasively passionate, mutual, reciprocal marriage, and the undoing of that was one of the terrifying things of the play, because in Shakespeare's Macbeth, there is a kind of paralysis as each of them in their different ways descends into madness, but there's never a kind of hostility or war between them. There maintains a kind of affectionate caretaking through the end, and that was something that I found really affecting and really sad here, that he turns on her just as everyone else does, and that virginal white dress, that wedding dress that she can't seem to change color from it, becomes a kind of almost a bloodied haunting of what the marriage has not been able to stay.
That blood on a white dress is so connected with the questions about childbirth, the questions about the children, which is so emphasised in this production, as we know sort of famously. Lady Macbeth in Shakespeare's play talks about having fed a child, having nursed a child, but then we've also got this situation that there seems to be no child, and that they both acknowledge there is no heir to the Macbeth, to Macbeth's kingship. So something has happened, and there's been lots of discussion about that. Lots of productions of Shakespeare's play have had a take on that. I think what Zinnie Harris has done is to really lean in to that and to the pain of that, and I think she enables us to see that very strongly. I think of all the horrible things that happen in the play, in a way, Lady Macbeth, the sister cousin saying to her, "I give you my child so it can die in your arms like all yours." And I think we all just felt, whoa, that's, as a piece of violence in this play, that is a sort of almost unrecoverable from, and that's very painful, and maybe more personally painful for people in the room. But it's very striking how that has been emphasised, and I think it is visually emphasised in that continued trope, isn't it, of the dirty white dress.
Why is it so important, Emma, that Lady Macbeth is so conspicuous, so conspicuously present, so called upon? What's your thinking about this?
There's slightly something that I haven't resolved in my mind about this play, about Zinnie Harris's play, which is the conspicuous association of both the central women with pregnancy, as if that is another scripted story for women from which they can't quite escape. In this play they're either witches or they're mothers or would like to be mothers, which is an old kind of split. The Lady Macbeth actor has got such beautiful lithe limbs and sort of physical ease and cheer and warmth and attention to the birds and to the natural world and all of those things. So, I mean, in some ways, I think she is a sign about the future, a different kind of future. Shakespeare's play is really preoccupied with what kinds of futures we can imagine or we can bring about. I think maybe that's something that she is sort of representing.
I mean, one thing that also struck me about Lady Macbeth is that she gives us the possibility of a kind of companionship and camaraderie, and it strikes me that part of the claustrophobia of this play is that the Macbeths have no one to talk to aside from each other, and they're kind of caught in this nightmare that they can't let on to anyone else. And it's here, the sort of playfulness that we see early on between Lady Macbeth and Lady Macduff struck me as a kind of Rosalind and her Celia, Hermia and her Helena, something we see more often in the comedies, that women can sort of lean on each other and form alliances and allegiances. Yeah. And that struck me as both one of the most disarming things about this production and one of the most heartbreaking.
Yeah. When the witches are withdrawing from Lady Macbeth, they say, perhaps we could have met again. Perhaps we could have actually looked out for each other. Perhaps there could have been a different non-antagonistic relationship. So I think that the sadness of that missed opportunity is very much present.
It almost teases you to imagine a world in which maybe Duncan would have died a natural death in the foreseeable future, and maybe Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, along with Lady Macduff and Banquo, could enjoy a kind of happy kind of round table of kingship in a peaceable world, and just this sense that there's this possibility of someone she, Lady Macbeth, clearly cares about so deeply, and has that taken away from her in the most brutal, and as you say, the most devastating way, when her so-called sister turns and says, well, you and your own children.
The enormous cultural weight that Shakespeare bears in English-speaking countries, in the US and in the UK, has actually meant that Shakespeare is an extraordinary creative stimulus to new work, either to new productions or to new dramas or new kind of creativity in all kinds of different media. Because such great creative people over such a long period have invested their creativity in Shakespeare, it's been like a kind of accumulator somehow, and that has really supercharged Shakespeare with extraordinary kind of creative energy, I think. I don't say that was necessarily always there in it. I think it's been added to over the centuries. So I think that Shakespeare needs to be within an ecosystem, as Tanya puts it, of a broad-ranging theatre which is not afraid commercially or in other ways to take risks with new drama. And we all need, as audiences, I mean, that's part of the call-out of this play, isn't it? We need to be more open to different experiences and not just going along for the same thing that we think we like, or we feel comfortable with, or we feel confident about. That's on us. But I do also think there is something about Shakespeare in our world which has extraordinary potential.
Thank you so much for all your